We good?
I think we're good. It looks like people are coming into the room now.
Okay.
All right, we're live.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Candy Cooke. I'm a partner with Agent E-Learning. I'm here with Craig Capilla, and this is our first quarterly webinar series, the Professional Market Report. We're trying to bridge the gap between agents and appraisers, so we've got both groups in here. Hopefully, we'll be able to go forward. Craig, would you like to do some introducing here?
Absolutely, Candy. Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is fun. I'm looking forward to doing this with you every quarter. By way of background, now, Candy and I have known each other for a long time. I'm an attorney based in the Chicago suburbs, and I represent agents and appraisers and a number of other professions in license board hearings and in lawsuits. And I frequently appear around the country talking about issues related to real estate, to valuation, to lending, and all of that sort of stuff. And obviously, with all of the litigation, all the market disruption we've seen over the last several years, we've been talking about this for a while and thought it would be a good idea to try to bring everybody together in one place and be able to talk through some of these issues so everybody's up to speed and understands what's going on, what's happened already, where we're at any given time, and where we think it's going to go from here. And so that's what brought us to launching this first one, talking about what we know so far and what we think.
Okay, and I'm a broker and an appraiser in Texas and interactive on the NAR level with real property valuation. I cross back and forth. So let's get started. Craig, I'm going to throw you under the bus. I'm going to put you out there of taking over the first part of this.
No, that's fine. Now, you know how this works. I usually like asking the questions more than I like answering them. That's why I sit in the chair that I do. But for you, I'll do that. So, of course, the part that's been hovering over everybody here for the last several years has been the impact of the NAR litigation involving cooperating compensation, involving commissions. Now, I know some folks here are going to be NAR member realtors. Some folks are not NAR members, but they are agents. We'll have some appraisers. Just so that we all stay in the safe zone on this, we are not on either the appraiser or the agent side. At no point in time are we going to talk about specific fees or percentages or any of that. I'm also not going to do that stupid thing you all have to do all the time and talk about, well, if I had this many bananas, it would, okay, we're not doing bananas either, but we're going to talk about concepts and all of this. The big hot button issue for everybody has been compensation, and particularly cooperating compensation. So as all of you know at this point, or hopefully all of you know, turns out it's not everybody that knows all about this, but as most of you would know by now, the NAR class action litigation involving fees and cooperating compensation largely came to a head last year, ultimately with a settlement that the terms of that settlement took effect as of August of last year. And as of November, that settlement was officially approved by the federal judge whose courtroom this was in. That changed the face of how compensation, how cooperating compensation is discussed and marketed. We've now had these many months since August and everything taking effect to try to figure this out and make sense of it and see where it's going to go from here. And I think, Candy, you probably agree with me on this one, but I think as we're here today, we can happily tell you we still have absolutely no idea how this is going to go for everyone.
No.
Because the reality of it is it's a mess and there is no consistency across all of this. If you pay attention now, talking about what's going on with this, one of the things that was a condition, it was a settlement term, was that discussion, advertising, marketing of cooperating compensation was going to have to be removed from the various multiple listing services. Well, that's great. There's over 500 of them that are independent, but they're all agent owned. They're all realtor owned, and they all have a different approach for how they're going to do this. Some groups are taking that info out of there entirely. They're killing off of those populating those forms and those fillable boxes, so you can't get it. They're not even taking the information anymore. Others are taking the information in, but not making it publicly viewable. Some have scraped the historical data out of there so that you can't see what had happened previously. Some are going back and post-closing, inputting that back in there. So they're preserving a record of historical data going forward. It's just not viewable and available while the properties are being actively marketed. It's a free-for-all out there, and it's dependent upon how big that MLS is, how well they're funded, and how much they're raring for a fight if this is going to find itself in another position where there's going to be follow-up litigation. And, Candy, we'll talk about some of that follow-up litigation today because, frankly, it's already started and we're in it now.
Right, right. So I teach classes, and I believe since June of last year through November, I had 4,000 people take contracts classes from me. And I still have people go, "What settlement?" And I have people, "Well, why are we changing? The way we used to do it was really good." Craig, you and I have been having these conversations over and over. We're having conversations with the public. We're talking to everybody. Why is it so hard that we can't get our heads around this? You have a thought?
I do have a thought. And the problem is we get inconsistent messaging from all levels of this. I mean, if we really go back to it, the original litigation that sparked all of this was actually being brought by the buyer side attorneys and representation of the buyer side. That quickly evolved to class action lawyers filing these on the listing side, on the seller side. And so they co-opted the terms of this. It went through the process. It went through at least one trial. I'm not going to get into the weeds of what all happened in that trial. But in the wake of that trial, all of the existing copycat litigation that was out there in the various districts arguing the same points all got on board, well, mostly got on board with a consolidated settlement, at which point in time, the buyers and their lawyers that started this to begin with, they had objections and problems with it. They said, "Oh, whoa, wait, we got left out of this. This settlement isn't really helping us. We didn't get to have a seat at the table." Department of Justice was sniffing all around this as far as anti-competitive behavior and that sort of stuff. They're one toe in, one toe out. They were in, and then the civil suits were going to settlement, and then they were out, and then the terms of the settlement framework was agreed to by the plaintiff's lawyers and the various individual brokerages and NAR as a whole and all of their counsel. They put that framework in place, pushed it out there, and then DOJ stepped back in and said, "Actually, that's not good enough for us." And the judge said, "Well, we don't really care anymore because you had your chance, but you're out." It's still a mess. Is DOJ going to do something or are they not? Look, folks, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone out there that there's a new sheriff in town. And so what is DOJ going to do with this? We don't know. Collectively across the board, the sorts of risks, the liabilities that we've been looking at, CFPB has been shutting everything down. HUD has been backing off of a lot of their positions. All of that outward facing has to get driven by the DOJ attorneys. Okay. So are they doing stuff? Are they not doing stuff? We don't know for sure. But just this week, and I guess we can kind of jump on this point quickly, just this week, in a filing in one of the existing cases in Massachusetts that didn't resolve as a part of the big collective settlement involving an MLS in federal court in Massachusetts, DOJ has stepped back in and made a filing as of Monday of this week with, well, all of our comments about clear cooperation have been taken out of context. We actually don't have an official position on clear cooperation. Well, we've all been hearing for a year and a half, 2 years that DOJ's position is that they find clear cooperation and that standard to be anti-competitive. In a filing this week, they said, we've never said that. So going back to the original question, which is why does everybody seem to have a hard time wrapping their heads around this? It's because even the people that are involved in driving this apparently are having a hard time wrapping their heads around this. And there's no consistent guidance right now for anyone on this sort of stuff. We can assure you that we're living in a whole new world. What does that mean? Nobody knows.
Nobody has a clue. Craig, I want to bring up something because this has started showing up in my classes. I feel like the talking heads were out there, the news people and giving information. The sellers were like, yeah, we're gonna get this. Did anybody bother to explain to the sellers that unless they're going to live in their car or under a bridge, they're going to be on the buy side after this with this compensation flipping back and forth? This seems to be one of the problems that some of the agents are bringing up, is that our sellers aren't understanding that, oh yeah, no, they don't have to pay buyer compensation. But what happens when they're the buyer?
Well, and that's a serious issue here that, again, we're going to have to wait for the market probably to sort this out and tell us how it's going to work. But you're exactly right. You have two sides to a transaction, or you don't have a transaction. So if you're leaving this house that you're selling, I'm going to get him on this one. I'm not going to offer any cooperating compensation out of all of that. Great. That is your right. Truth be told, it's always been your right, but that's okay.
Mhm.
Now that we're here, now that we understand what's going on, now good luck going out and buying a new place to move into without having to throw some scratch at it. And it's interesting because the market participants have perhaps a confusion, a misguided sense of how all this works and where it's going to go. I hate to say it, but the professionals involved at various levels have a misguided sense of how this is going to go. I will tell you, the wailing and gnashing of teeth on my end when word first broke. I mean, we're flashback almost 2 years now when the presumptive settlement terms were just starting to trickle out. And one of the things that was early on as an understanding of this framework was now agents that are going to be representing buyers are going to have to enter a written agreement with those buyers detailing the terms of that arrangement for all of the compensation, no compensation, or somewhere in between. Doesn't matter what the number is, but you're going to have something in writing. I had buyer side agents just rending garments and ready to leap off of roofs going, what do you mean I have to have a contract with my client to get paid? Like, in my mind, this was not a foreign concept. And I can tell you, any of the brokerages that I represent, it's never been a question as far as business practices or company policy. You're going to have an agreement with someone that details these are the services I'm providing, and I do expect to get paid for working, and this is how I'm going to get paid. Now, you can build your own map from there about how much and what and where it comes from. But one of the things that shocked me was how many people thought, oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm supposed to get people to sign a paper or piece of paper saying that they're agreeing to pay me for working. And as the conversation evolved more, I had a lot, again, this is a lot of buyer side focused agents were then arguing, well, I just get these lists, I take them, and then I get cooperating compensation from the other side. How am I supposed to tell these buyers why they should pay me? Okay, if you don't know how to articulate what you're doing for your client, I don't know that I can help you with that one. But it was fascinating to watch that conversation evolve. Now, I think we've all gotten past that hurdle. As we know, the settlement terms came out and said, before you start showing properties to a potential buyer, you must have an agreement in place. But now here comes the craziness back into this. DOJ first popped up and prairie dogged this one and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Well, that's way too early to make the buyer sign a contract for you. That's not fair. Okay, which one is it? They're supposed to know what my services are and how much they cost, or not too soon, get them going for a little while and then we can go ahead and have them find out how much they're going to have to pay you if they really like the place. Again, it was a nonsensical point on that one to pop up then and say, all right, yeah, we're doing this wrong. We're asking them to commit too early. So again, this is all being driven by people that didn't really have a good understanding at all of what's going on and why. And that's leading to inconsistency in enforcement. That's leading to misunderstandings about what's required and what isn't. And it's driving a lot of the uncertainty as we go forward because nobody's really quite sure what we've accomplished yet. So we don't all know what the current rules of the game are and how theirs are going to stay the same or get changed going forward.
So, Craig, as we try to talk about all of this, I'm an old one. I've been in this business for way too long. I remember the late 80s, the mid 90s, where we started bringing in buyer representation. Before that, we didn't have it. And I have had people say, oh, I've never gotten a buyer's rep signed. I've never done this. I had somebody who's brand new into the business say in a class recently, she said, I don't think this is such a big deal for those of us who are new because we don't know any different. And we just go get the stuff signed. The biggest problem with getting documents signed and things taken care of is us. It's not our clients. We just have to explain what's going on.
Right.
And that's the expertise that they're asking, that they're expecting from us to be able to tell this.
Well, and that's a great point. And, it's actually a good frame of reference to remember, how did we get here today where this is the argument and this is the fight that we're having? It's because 35 or 40 years ago, we put into place the system that occurs today, because you're right. Once upon a time, there was a broker who had a listing. And even if somebody who was a sub-agent of that listing broker was communicating with the buyer, guess what? That was still somebody who was working as an agent of the list side. Buyer's reps, buyer's agency was a creation of what the government and what the industry thought was anti-competitive then. So then they created the idea of having buyer's reps involved in all of this. Fast forward a few decades, and now we're arguing, well, that's not fair and it's anti-competitive how they're getting paid from all of this. Look, at one point, and I love the argument that, well, this is harming the sellers because this is taking money out of their pockets because they're having to pay the agents from both sides. Folks, I got news for you. If you don't have a buyer, you don't have money. So isn't it that the buyer is actually paying both sides? One could make that argument here too. That's the problem with twisting all of this stuff around. The money has to come from somewhere. You have to have two to tango. You can't have a transaction without an interested buyer or a seller. If you don't have a buyer, you don't have any money. That's where that money is coming from. If you want to tell the buyer that you now need to come and you need to cut the check directly to your representation, it's easy for buyers. They go, great, that's less money that I have to hand you to buy your house. We're going to watch that impact as we go on. We're not necessarily seeing it in the numbers yet because we're also not seeing that listing side agents have stopped offering cooperating compensation. They have to do it a different way, but they haven't stopped offering it. They're going to private listing portals, look at Instagram, look at Twitter, look at Facebook, come to my own brokerage website, and you can see what sort of a cooperating cut we're offering. It took about 10 seconds for savvy listing agents to figure out the workaround of not being able to post that information in the MLS anymore. But we know what's coming. DOJ had, now they've been quiet on this again since the administration turnover, but they had been loud in the lead up to it that their overall position is they don't think any sort of cooperating commission should be permitted at all at any point. And we've seen litigation start to take that approach as well. if that gains traction, if that ultimately becomes where we end up here in the next 18 months, 24 months, wherever that is, now that's where you're going to see a market reset, because what you're doing selfishly here, because I'm an advocate for my professionals that are all in the field here, you're going to strip away purchase power from the buyers, and you're going to create an economic reset when suddenly rates are still up and nobody has the cash on hand anymore, and you no longer have the ability to buy the house that you did 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months ago. We're going to see a problem there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I'm looking at this. We've got some comments coming in where, we talk about, I loved it. Denise said the concept of having a contract for your services is not a new concept. Code of Ethics has it. Our licensing has it. We have all of these things where we're supposed to document this. The confusion is overwhelming. And we haven't touched even on the part about appraisers and
No.
how
And that's a mess too.
how that affects us. And as an appraiser, I'm going to start wearing a helmet and a flak jacket as I'm teaching, because people get so mad about statements and how we're going to handle this. And Craig, I'm just going to blame the attorneys. I'm just going to turn around.
Please do. Look, we've earned every bit of it. All right. I'm fine with that. You know what I really despise? Lawyers, man. Like, I know I am one, but honestly, it's terrible. And this is how we get here.
This is what we wrote up this agreement. We have all of these things coming at us. We're trying to give suggestions of how to make this work. We're trying to make things come together. And people get so angry and they say, well, that's just not the way that should have been done. And it's like, the attorneys did this. This is not us. This is not the agents. This is not the brokers. This is not the sellers, the buyers, the appraisers, anybody. The attorneys put this together, and I truly wonder if the attorneys understood what they were doing.
I don't know whether they took the time to understand what they were doing, because they fully understood how much money they were making.
Oh, absolutely.
It's hard to force someone to understand something when they have a vested interest in not understanding it. Okay. And this is, I'm always up for a good lawyer joke. If you think you've got an original one out there, please tell it to me, because I'm pretty sure I've heard them all. I'm on board with all of that. We have earned all of the scorn that is heaped on us. Okay. I do defend lawyers in real life as part of my job, but as a collective, I do not defend lawyers. I'm sorry. It's again, we are reaping consistently what we have sown. Okay. All of that being said, I don't think the motivation was ever there. I think you had two different competing interests in this, where DOJ, particularly of a set in time, and it was not unique to DOJ, it was a lot of the alphabet agencies, and God knows I deal with most of them on a regular basis. Anything that remotely sniffs like something might be a competitive advantage, the immediate default setting for that was, well, that actually means it's anti-competitive, and we've got to go ahead and put a boot on it. So that was a government perspective for a series of time that may or may not be changing. And I don't mean that glibly and like, oh, well, like I said, new sheriff's in town, we're going to find out. Some of the whispers and rustling that has come out of the new administration already, particularly when you start thinking about like SEC enforcement and things like that, has sounded a lot like new boss, same as the old boss. I mean, some of it is not looking like it's a harbinger of change. So again, we don't know. There's a lot of we don't know right now, but that's the government end of things throwing a wrench in it. Their interest was not really what's going to be best overall as this shakes out. It's we think we can save consumers $5 by throwing a wrench into this. Okay, but you're going to cost them $50 down the road, but we saved them $5 today. We saved them. Okay. So there's a little bit of that mentality. And then when it got to the civil litigation part and you're dealing with the class action lawyers, they will forever find a reason to push forward on class action litigation because they're going to get $5 million for every $2.57 check that you get as being a certified member of the class that just got litigated. Like, that's the business model for that stuff. Hand to the sky. I personally know the guy that went after Subway for the $5 footlongs because they were only averaging between 10 and 11 inches and filed that as a national class action lawsuit. Okay. This is the sort of targeting that they do because there's like, they'll eventually pay to make it go away. Right. So were they worried really about what the net impact is to the consumer downstream on all of this? Absolutely not. That never came into the equation. Now, you've got to make that argument in your legal filings so that you can convince a court that they should hear the case, but that's lip service, okay? What they wanted to do was, these folks are really well funded. We know, at least as of the time this stuff was originating, NAR membership was north of 1.5 million dues paying members. I don't know what the actual number is today. I know it's less, but at the time it was north of that amount. They're well capitalized all over. They are everywhere you look. They are a top 5 politically donating organization at all of its various levels. So you know what that means? They've got cash and they'll pay to make it go away. There's your motivation for pushing this stuff forward. They're well capitalized. They'll eventually cut a check.
All right. All right. So we are drifting down into a pit of despair as we're talking about this. But I think we need to take a little bit of a break. I think we have, Ben was going to give us some information. Ben, are you where you can talk to us about our coupon code?
And there it is. Look at that.
I think Ben's introducing this.
I think Ben's gone. I'll jump in. There's a discount code for Agent E-Learning. Everybody can use it. AEL15 for 15% off any classes. You can take a class with Candy or anybody else, but join us for that. Use that code and you can join us. All right.
All right. Thank you for doing that, Jim. We appreciate that. Okay, Craig, can we be more positive at this point?
Yeah, I'm positive we're in for rough roads ahead. No, absolutely. It is not all doom and gloom. And I certainly don't want to present that message either. There are some significant opportunities here as the market begins to sort itself out. And again, what is that all going to look like? I don't really know for sure. I know we've got some follow-on litigation that's coming out of this. We've got some wrap-up of the underlying litigation about just whether or not you can market the cooperating compensation. That's why there's some holdouts who didn't join in the initial settlement. There's some residual litigation about other areas. Some of the fine folks of the state of South Carolina decided to file a class action. They're out of the Charleston area. I can't remember now if they were Mount Pleasant or if they were Isle of Palms or wherever. There was a brokerage that decided. Was it? Okay. See, you know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They decided to file a lawsuit that says just because I'm a member of my local area organization association, that doesn't mean that my dues should travel upstream to the state level and ultimately to NAR. And their consumer hook into all of that was, but you tell me that if I don't do this, I can't get lockbox access and show these properties. So that's anti-competitive. So, okay, that's another lawsuit that's going on right now, actually here in the Northern District of Illinois. It's expanded over into a class action on that. So we know that litigation's going on. We're watching all of that stuff. We will endeavor to keep you all posted on that as we do these quarterly updates. Part of what we'll touch on is what's new here, what has changed. But the upside of all of this is that for the agents out there that are keeping their finger on the pulse, that are understanding where the changes are, you're also probably recognizing some opportunities as well. You know, if you polished up your elevator pitch to your prospective buyers as to why they should engage you and how you can help represent their interests and get them the house of their dreams, you're probably doing a better job at the outset of locking in those prospective buyers and getting them going. You're allowed now. I shouldn't say you're allowed now. You've always been allowed to be, but it's more prevalent. It's more common on the listing side to have that conversation with your seller and really talk through the process. This is how it works. This is how it's worked for a long time. You have the autonomy to do whatever you want, but here's why you may consider this, or here's why you may consider that. On the valuation side of all of this, I still see probably more uncertainty than any consistency because Candy, you were right. We haven't even really talked about the appraisal side of this, but the reality of it is the historical data that appraisers rely on has been to some degree scrubbed as far as is all of the cooperating compensation talk fully removed from the MLS where they're researching their sales. Some MLSs, and we mentioned, are coming in post-closing and inputting that information. So there's a historical record of what it is. There's other MLSs that are saying, oh, yeah, that's no problem. Just throw that in as a concession like all of the other deal concessions. Now, I think you and I are adamant that no, that is not a concession and that's not the right answer. But appraisers need to be aware that depending upon what market you're in and what your local area MLSs are doing, that may be where you have to look for that information or not. So I would say from that end, there is a little bit more heartburn, a little bit more inconsistency, just as far as the data collection and the data preservation. The lenders are aware of this. One of the things we saw move quickly was when cooperating compensation was potentially going to be prohibited altogether. Immediately, Fannie and Freddie, and quickly thereafter, FHA, jumped on board and modified their lending rules to allow for a portion of the funds allocated in the loan to be used for paying for those settlement services, i.e. paying your buyer's agent, buyer rep, that was previously prohibited as a part of this because it always came out the back end post-closing as the proceeds were cut up. VA is a mess because everything at VA moves more slowly. It requires federal rulemaking, but they issued a letter quite quickly indicating that they were not going to engage in prohibiting that sort of use of funds until such time as they could get to the rule change and get it through the rulemaking process. So the good news is the financial industry, the backstop on all of this, really quickly figured out how to free up the capital so that they wouldn't be bringing the market to a screeching halt, which means if this does go forward and if there is any traction to prohibiting cooperating compensation altogether, the good news is the funding aspect of this is already pretty well positioned to be able to deal with that. So again, we shouldn't see market disruption in the sense that it brings the transactions themselves to a halt. However, we're going to see a market valuation impact of that when we start talking about what's the purchasing power of the buyers, right? So there's pros and cons to that one, but it's not all bad news.
Okay, so I'm going to be the devil's advocate.
No, not you.
Yes, and I'll be in trouble as usual. But okay, yes, I was here before the internet was used in all of our stuff. There's a solution to some of these problems about how this affects the market. And when I say it, I kind of laugh, but we can call each other. We can, we can talk to each other and ask, how does this affect the marketplace? Like, as we've said, the seller doesn't have any money to pay commissions or compensation unless there's a deal. And so negotiations, we should be able to negotiate and do this. Is there something that's saying that we're not supposed to talk to each other? We're not supposed to communicate. We're not supposed to talk to the appraiser. We're not supposed to talk to the brokers. We don't want to hear from them. We have a fence that goes down between us.
No, there's none of that. In fact, I would say throughout this, at all levels, communication is the key. I don't care if it's agent to agent. I don't care if it's appraiser to agent. Anybody that's moving through this process, you have to be able to communicate and confirm data and confirm an understanding. So taking this back into the agent space for a minute, look, this is something that's fairly consistent already for the folks that are on the commercial side, right?
Absolutely.
Any commercial agent out there knows one of the first things you have to do is pick up the phone, call the agent on the other side, and figure out what your compensation agreement is or isn't. That's not typically in the initial marketing of everything. That's a conversation that has to occur. One of the things that shocked me in this process when everything started rolling was how many appraisers I heard from going, now, do you mean I'm going to have to call the agent for every sale that I'm looking at? And I was like, I'm going to need you to stop, because what you've just told me is that you haven't been doing that already, and I don't want to know about that. Okay? Data verification has always been part of the job. So that's not a new invention here either. These communications are critical. They always have been. Yeah, this puts a finer point on it. But again, there's nothing new under the sun with some of this stuff. The idea that you might want to have a contract with your client, not shocking. The fact that you have to talk to other people and not just operate in a bubble, not shocking. We can do this. And frankly, for the folks that are not willing or able to get on board with that very basic level of professionalism, they are going to be the ones who are not here when this is all over, and there will be more room for all of the rest of you.
All right. So we're brainstorming. We're trying to help everybody to understand all of this stuff. We talk about, we got to talk to people. We got to interact. Setting expectations. Oh, wait, we have to tell our clients how this might go. Oh, wait, we might have to explain to people what's happening. Oh, wait, we can't just send them DocuSign or digital ink or whatever. And, I tease about it, but how many of us have had people who go click, 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 sign, and it's gone. And we have multiple pages of legally binding documents that are floating around out there. I went and looked at the NAR stats. They say we're at about 1.4. We've lost 8%. No?
That's what they say. That's fine. That's what they say.
That's what they say.
I'm a cynic. I'm not buying that. I think ultimately there's going to be a reset. I think we'll find out that the numbers are lower.
Okay. So I serve in leadership at my association. I don't know why I thought that was a smart idea, but the thing is that everybody paid their dues. We're not going to see the roll off of everybody until the end of 2025, when everybody goes, I'm done. They said that 70% of the members have not done a single transaction in 2024. This follows with the numbers that I give in my classes of that there's a good core of people. There are good agents, there are good brokers, there are good appraisers, there's good all of these people. We've had these cores of people that we've been working with. It's the lazy ones who are going to go away. It's not the people who are sitting in here listening to us talk. It's the people who take all online classes, and boast about taking all of their education in 2 hours and 35 minutes. They got in during the hot times, and they're finding out that this is not a friendly, easy mailbox money type of business.
Sure.
Craig,
And we've seen that before, right? We've been through that cycle. I mean, for the folks on this that don't know me, I know you know the backstory, but for the folks here that don't know me, I was a transactional attorney. I was handling real estate closings, residential, small commercial things in a law firm. And then in October of 2007, we had 3 closings that month. Okay, that was the canary in the coal mine. That was a bad one. So I needed to get out. I needed to do something else with my life. Looked at a couple other job opportunities. Had an offer to go be a divorce lawyer. Couldn't do that. Couldn't get out of bed in the morning. So I went to work for the state of Illinois. And I went to work as a licensing board regulatory prosecutor for the state. I started on the Thursday before Bear Stearns collapsed. Okay. Picked a good time to go in-house into government and get a steady paycheck. But the next 4.5 years of working there was riding the wave of all of the fallout of it used to be free money and everything, properties flew off the shelves, and everybody knew that every property was always worth more on Tuesday than it had been on Monday. I went home for the weekend and we had a 3 bears scenario, particularly on the appraiser side. When I left the office on Friday, every appraiser in the country was too low and too conservative and was just killing deals left and right. And by the time I got into the office on Monday morning, all the appraisers were way too high. It was all overvalued. Everything was fraud. That was how quick the market shifted and the economy changed, because we had the rug pulled out from under us. A lot of folks that were in practice at that time didn't survive that mess. The folks that have come on board since that time, of which there's a great many, have never seen that kind of disruption. And so they're seeing that disruption now. And I think it's scaring off folks that didn't realize necessarily the effort that really has to get put into this to be a professional. And that's, look, folks, this is the title card for this webinar is not an accident. There's a reason why this is the professional market report, because we're not here to talk to the folks that are not professionals. And to Candy's point, and she's heard me say this probably every time she's ever seen me speak at any event, is typically I have a pretty good sense of who needs to hear this from me and who doesn't. And I can tell that there's hundreds of you sitting at your computer right now that don't really need to hear me speak today. And I know that because you are the ones that are here hearing me speak today. I'm not worried about you. It's your colleagues, your peers in the environment that couldn't be bothered to get out of bed for something like this, that are walking blindly through this. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal in July or August of last year talking about the pending start date of the settlement terms from the NAR settlement, and some staggering percentage of real estate agents they had spoken with, the tens of the dozens of the percentages. It was something along 30 to 40%, I think, if I recall correctly. I have to find the article, but it may have been a higher number. 30 to 40% of agents they spoke to didn't know that there had been a settlement and that terms were taking effect on August 17th. And this was a late July or August 1st timeline article in the Wall Street Journal. Folks, that's terrifying. I don't care if you agree with the terms or not. Like, in my line of work, nobody cares whether or not you like the rule or the law. It's, do you know it and do you apply it? That's the only part that counts, right? It was staggering to find out how many people didn't even know that the world was going to change in a couple of weeks. And frankly, those are the people that are taking this really hard right now.
Absolutely. We keep having, and I have people say, what new forms, what lawsuit, what changes, what, and it's like, okay, I have to say it. You can't fix stupid and they walk among us. Okay. That has been my mantra. I apologize to anybody who feels that I'm being insulting, but I've said Article 18, it is not part of the Code of Ethics, but it kind of matches into the numbers. You can't fix stupid and they walk among us. We have to deal with this. We have to talk to each other. I'm sorry. And we had a comment come up and it says talking doesn't work for marketing reaction adjustments in an appraisal. Well, guys, the attorneys have said, we can't do this. How are you going to confirm that data if you don't talk to people? There is no big computer in the sky to give us that data.
Well, it's an interesting point, and I'll tell you, I get the perspective of that comment, which is appraisers are always a day late on the data. It's trailing information, right? You only get to look at something that has already happened, and you're only able to get to it as quickly as that data is then input and presented to you. So from that standpoint, I absolutely understand the perspective of that comment. And I know it says there needs to be a national data bank for all sales agents to input. Funny part about it is, no, there doesn't. There is a national data bank for all of that. And Fannie and Freddie have it, and they're not going to let you look at it. We were in DC a couple of weeks ago. We asked the question again, and they were like, yeah, no. Like, it was that simple.
No,
now, all of them might be fired already. I don't know, because that was 2 weeks ago.
Yes,
but the reality is we do have all of that information. Appraisers have been screaming from the rooftops for years, hey, Fannie, hey, Freddie, you collect every single bit of data. What do you think the UAD was when it came out in 2009 to have a uniform data set? That was all the appraisers giving away the farm and giving the perfectly coded and formatted data set to Fannie and Freddie so they could chase and monitor and collect all of this. They have that information. They've got millions and millions of transactions over the last 15 years. They're just not going to let you look at it.
I have asked that question, I don't know how many times. And when I ask it of Fannie Mae, we've got one guy who rolls his eyes because he knows what's going to come out of my mouth. It comes out this last time he finally said, well, that might change. And then we stopped. The conversation was over. So, but yes, we understand we need this data. We understand. I'm one of the crazies from a non-disclosure state. We can't even disclose most of the information. Okay. And that we had that come up also about appraisal or assessors and how they're handling this. Ultimately, we need to know how the seller felt about what they got to put in their pocket and what the buyer felt that they had to pull out of their pocket. Hello. That's our world. We seem to expect the technology to help us out with this. We have to get down and dirty and do our own research. We're going to have to learn to dig. I don't see any other solution unless Fannie Mae will give us and Freddie Mac will give us that data.
No, and that's a really good point. Technology has helped in some areas. Technology is a great tool, right? No matter what platform, what new great software pack, whatever it is, for the agents, for the appraisers, everybody has seen significant technological advances in the last 10, 15 years. But, and it's funny because we were talking about this before we rolled the cameras and went live. This technology, call it what you want, all the way up and through everybody's latest craze of AI, does not replace the judgment. Technology is not good at knowing what it is not good at. And we don't have that solution in place. So, talking about rolling up your sleeves and getting down and dirty, it's the human, it's the judgment that has to look at the output, that has to look at the returns from these data solutions and go, I'm not getting the whole story here. This isn't the full picture. Where do I have to go to find the rest of that information? And the ones that excel at that are the ones who are best positioned in the environment we are in the environment going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm trying to think of what, since I'm being devil's advocate, I'm trying to stay out of trouble.
That's no fun for me. I'm here to get you in trouble.
I know,
I'm
but
not.
you get me into trouble on a regular basis. So what's our next thing that we want to touch?
So that's a great question. So we've only got a few minutes left on this.
Right.
Theoretically, I know we've got some comments and some questions coming in. I actually just saw a question come across the wire here regarding USPAP standards, and the idea that this question came and says, is there a standard in USPAP that you can share with us, that we can share with other agents, that the appraiser is required to call the agents and confirm the data? And because I'm the lawyer, I'll answer that question, because every good lawyer knows the answer is it depends. Okay. What you've got there is no, there is nothing that is clear, black and white language that says an appraiser must call the agent, but you can point the agents towards standard 1 and the requirement that you must verify the data that you are using. And so, and this is a great bugaboo. This is for you agents out there who look at appraisal reports, and for you appraisers that are writing appraisal reports. I hate when I get to the sales data, particularly comparable sales that are being gridded out for a subject, and it says, what is the source of the data? MLS number ABCD 1234, data verification. And there's a box for that asks, where was your verification source? Not where you obtained it, but what did you do to verify? And the appraiser writes in there, public record. Oh, really? What does that mean? Public record what? You went down to the courthouse and started digging around for property cards in a dusty box? You called the agent, hey, that's your box that actually fills that in? Going, I called the agent that had that sale and confirmed that the data on the MLS was accurate. All of this. So the onus has always been there for the appraiser to do that. Now, part of why we wanted to have this session, or not specifically this topic, but this webinar, and really cross-pollinate this to try to bridge the gap between appraisers and agents, is that a lot of appraisers seem to think that there is an issue, and oftentimes there is. Trying to get an agent to pick up and answer your call sometimes can be a real challenge. I'm not making any light of that. It's true, but also hopefully educating the agents that, hey, when you get that call from an appraiser, you might want to take that call and help them out, because the data that they're solidifying, you might need your appraiser on your next deal to be able to confirm that, or the appraiser is going to get back in touch with the lender and go, yeah, I wasn't able to verify any of this data, so sorry, I can't get to contract on this one. I don't have any market support. The data I was able to confirm says we're a good bit under contract here. So as a result, this is my value because it's all I could support. It's all I could confirm. There's a real downstream effect to agents not playing ball with appraisers and helping them confirm the data. Because look, appraisers are pretty good at researching sales data, but you know who's the best at knowing the sales data? The agents that are selling. They've got the data in hand, okay? This is a symbiotic relationship. There has to be the cooperation there, or the system doesn't work.
Okay. So somewhere, somehow, we've decided that we're adversaries. And it's my passion, Craig. I'm on this all the time. We gotta go back and we gotta be friends. Why can't we be friends is something that I say. Appraisers, please understand that the agents have a completely different job than you do. Agents, please understand that the appraisers have a completely different job. And we're trying to get this forward, this conversation out there. It just seems to hit bumps. And like you said, public data, where do we go find this information? We got to talk to people. And then all of a sudden I hear from the appraiser saying, I found this agent who actually knew what they were doing, and they gave us great information. And I have agents say, I got this appraiser, and they explained what was going on. I think it builds our business. We're not in this to do this for free. We're in this to make a living, and we got to learn how to deal with each other, and we got to talk to each other.
Well, I'd say it builds your business, but it's also about being a professional. This is why we're doing this again. I'm here. I represent professionals.
Yeah.
That's more of an ambition than an action, because let's be real honest. I represent a lot of mopes too, okay? That I wouldn't necessarily say that they're all that professional. I mean, you joke about the idea that, your Article 18, which is only half a joke because it's true. But like I've always said, like that's the sort of, those statements are the things that I need on needlepoint on my wall of my office, because that idea is what's going to put my kids through college. All right. Those people out there that are doing the shortcut and doing this is it's the quick and dirty, and I can make a buck off of that, and I can get the next one out there. They're the folks that end up having to call me because they've had something go terribly sideways, and now they're facing a disciplinary action, or they're facing a lawsuit or something of the like. To the cooperation and the communication just between the two professions, I can tell you, I've got an agent in my backyard here that, this year and a half, 2 years ago, flat out told me, anytime I'm working on a transaction and we get the appraisal in, I immediately go ahead and request the second appraisal, just as a matter of course, because that's always going to get me where I need to go. I almost fell out of my chair on that one, because then I had to educate that agent and explain, when you require the second appraisal, do you know what process that you have pressed go on, and you cannot get that horse back in the barn? They had no idea that there was a whole series of steps once the first appraisal is tossed and the second one is ordered, that results in the appraiser having to be turned into the state for a disciplinary proceeding on the first one. And this agent looked me in the eye and said, I do it on every transaction because the second one always gets me what I need. That's not a professional.
No. And how is it that they get to that point and they don't understand? We don't understand the process. I've been teaching 15 years, and there are things of teaching about appraisals to agents. There was only one course when I first started teaching. And, I've got a whole pile of them, and there's a lot of other people teaching, and I'm recruiting people to do this. But why did we stop talking? I don't know. I'm just throwing out out there.
No, I mean, it's a great question. I'm not sure whether it's the existing regulatory structure that has actually built a wall between the professions. It may be. It might have just been a series of the market disruptions where okay, fine. We don't really need to have that communication. It may be some fallout still from '08 and '09 when everyone got spooked with
Yeah.
HVCC and Dodd-Frank and, oh my goodness, I can't influence the appraiser in any way, so I'd better not talk to them at all. And vice versa. The appraisers, there are appraisers, you and I have both heard from them that go, well, I can't talk to the agent because they're just going to hand me sales they think I should look at, and I can't look at those. They can't influence me. My goodness, are you telling me that somebody who might have access to better data than you, your perspective is, I can't hear you. You can't tell me. Like, that's juvenile, but it's a misunderstanding of what appraiser independence and what Dodd-Frank really does and doesn't do, right? And same thing, RESPA, TILA, all the fun stuff that's all been built on, and it's all piecemeal, and it's a mess. There's a lot of confusion about what it means and what it doesn't mean. But again, there's an opportunity here to get people to bridge that gap. And look, if us having a conversation has any small part in pushing that information out there and educating, everyone's going to benefit from it.
Absolutely. So we've chattered for an hour, Craig, as usual. We could do this another 2 or 3 hours, but I think we need to wrap this up and say, you know what, my feeling on this, and I'm really proud that we did this. We put this out there. My goal in life is to approach the professionals. The other ones, I don't care. They can go away. I want to take care of the professionals who come to me and want to be educated and to learn and to brainstorm. And I hope that we can keep going with this. How do you feel about today?
You know what? I like this approach. Hopefully we will get an opportunity to hear more from the folks attending and give us a sense of, it's great if Candy and I like the day. You all tell us if you liked the day and if it makes sense that we want to keep doing this again, because I'll let you in on a little secret. We're going to keep doing this again. But it would be great if it's actually of worth to you all and you want to keep watching this sort of stuff. But no, this is the sort of stuff I enjoy doing because, frankly, for me, it's a little bit of preventative medicine in my business that I don't get to do very often, is sit down, talk about these issues, and hopefully educate and address concerns so that they don't arise. And so I think, as a lead into all of that, you'll notice, folks, that the marketing of this said this is episode 1, not to bury the lead, but there is going to be more than just an episode 1. We will have an episode 2 that actually comes in the next quarter, and we'll compile some topics towards that. We'll continue to touch on the NAR litigation and the legacy stuff and keep that information coming as there are updates. If there are other hot topics that jump onto the scene, we'll look to incorporate all of that stuff too. And as a shameless plug, I will say, for those of you that are around or are able to be around, there it is. It just went on screen for you all. So the appraisers, the National Association of Appraisers, which I do a lot of work with that group, has a conference conveniently scheduled right over the Final Four. It was wonderful that they picked that weekend on the calendar, but nevertheless, we will be in San Antonio at the same time as all of the basketballers for this conference. So any of you who are able, we would love to have you come out and join. I will be there. Candy, you'll be there.
Yes, I'm going to be.
If anybody wants to pull us out of a crowd and talk our ear off, we'll be physically there in San Antonio in just a couple of weeks. And then again, as I mentioned, there will also be a follow-up to this in the next quarter with episode 2. And if it's of value and worth to you folks, we'll keep doing this as long as you listen. So I'd say thanks everyone for coming. Tell us how we did. Tell us what we can do better. And Candy, thanks for hosting and doing this. This is awesome. I love doing this with you. And let's do it again.
All right. And I'll see you in a couple weeks at AX.
Wonderful. I'll see you there.